by the way.
No worries. All right. Do we have any attendee? We have one attendee. Let's see. Sarah Barr's in the audience. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Housing and Zoning Subcommittee of the Amherst Planning Board. It's Thursday, December 4th. It is now 11:38 a.m. We will start with any announcements. I don't have any other than to announce to us that Sarah Barr is in the attendees. Sarah, hello. We usually run this meeting more as a conversation, so please raise your hand. I'm happy to bring you over to join in as much input as you'd like to share. Nate, you have any announcements for us, or Fred or Angus, anything to share?
I don't.
Okay. Not seeing anybody. We don't have them. I did not task us with minutes to approve. I think the drafts are all still posted. So again, let's get back on that for next time or the time after. So we'll just dive right in. So we had sort of put out these three main thoughts for today's meeting. I was tasked to think about 40Y, or at least get educated somewhat on 40Y. I've only got halfway there, but I'll share with what I know. And then we're going to continue talking about North Amherst overlay. Again, based on our conversation last night, I'm hoping we can help Nate move that along. And then based, I think, mostly on the articles that came from the planning board, we were also going to talk about main corridors and how we can imagine some of that changing zoning. So yeah, that's sort of the plan for today. So again, just for timing wise, I think maybe I'll give us maybe just 10 or 15 minutes to talk about 40Y. Let's spend a good chunk of time with North Amherst, as much as we need, and then we'll just go from there.
And Jesse, I did some work on 40Y as well.
Oh, great, good. Maybe we were figuring out complementary things. And so, yes, this is a state program. It's fairly new. The idea is to incentivize and really make starter home districts, for lack of a better word, right? Starter homes had a pretty clear definition. It was, I think it was a max 1850 square feet, if I remember correctly, at least 3 bedrooms. And the other main sort of physical requirement was that you had to allow at least 4 per acre sort of housing. Those were the straightforward pieces that I could figure out. I got stuck very quickly trying to understand how this works on one aspect, which was you define a place, but there's already existing houses on existing parcels. How does that ever shift to become the dominant role in that defined area? Unless all the owners are, again, I don't know. Nate, maybe you know, or Angus, maybe you figure that out. It seems like a really difficult thing to manage, to make happen, unless it's sort of a cleared big space you have already. Angus, did you figure some of that out? Hi, Bruce.
A little bit. And sorry for my voice. Everyone in my family is sick. So,
Sure.
yes. So it seemed that from the stuff I found at the state level, it was pretty confusing. But I think how most municipalities are taking this, it's an overlay. And so just like the North Amherst overlay, it would serve as an option for parcels, and possibly for combining parcels. But uh, it's an overlay. I did a bunch of, so I pulled up some state documents, but then I also pulled up all the stuff I could find on the Mansfield case that Nate pointed us to, and they have a whole web page on what they're calling. So they're not calling it a 40Y. They're not calling it a starter home overlay. They're calling it a multi-generational housing overlay district. MGHOD, because it seems like in planning, everyone loves acronyms that are unwieldy. And but I like what they're trying to do, because they're like, it's not just about starter homes, it's also about homes for people who want to downsize. It's about affordable homes, because another component of the starter home the 40Y requirement is that it has affordable units as well. And so they're trying to kind of pitch it as not just about starter homes, but just about smaller homes, which can fit a variety of needs for all kinds of different families, which I also like. And I was thinking some of the questions that it raised for me as I was looking at all of their materials, because they've had hearings on it, they've done presentations on it, all of which are accessible. They've gotten legal counsel feedback on their zoning bylaw changes, and you can see their zoning bylaw changes. So basically, what they're doing is they're just adding an overlay. So it'd be like an article, 17 or whatever, 18, I think we'd be on to. Article 18, well, Article 18 might be the North Amherst overlay. So it could be Article 19 would be the our version of 40Y. Um, and so they have draft text as well, that I was able to find. But some of
Well,
the
I thought,
questions that are still um, big questions for me is this starter home option. I'm wondering how much of it could be cottage style, which is kind of different from the way the starter homes are pitched. But I think cottage style could fit in with the 40Y approach. And then row houses as well. It depending on how we did it, I could imagine this 40Y version being able to cover both traditional starter homes, where it's, individual homes on tiny lots, essentially with their own like, parking access, whatever. It could cover cottage style cluster developments, and then it could potentially even cover row houses. I don't know if all of those are possible with one designation, but if they were, that would be really helpful for us as we're thinking about our zoning priorities, especially since we've talked repeatedly about the promise of these three different approaches in different kind of parts of the town.
yeah. So I also thought that both those styles could fit in. I don't know about all in one, but again, just backing up to the existing building or home issue, I thought I read somewhere, I'm just trying to find it again, there's an incentive to do it, but it's a one-time incentive when you first do it, and it's based on the number of homes or the amount of land is how much the municipality gets from the state. It didn't seem like a huge amount of money. It was like $1,000 per or
Yeah.
something like that. But again, let's say we pick an area and there's 10 lots, each with a single family house. Do they all need to commit up front to get, all those owners need to commit that they're going to build in this way to get that incentive? Because otherwise, what's the real incentive other than us trying to convince owners they should build three more houses on their acre? I have trouble imagining how that proceeds unless like it's a developer who we know is interested and we designate that area for that purpose. But I like a lot what you just said, Angus, about could it be more like an overlay, not worry about the incentive so much, but then what do we give up to just allow this increase in smaller housing density, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, staff looked at it a little bit, and what it can do is things that zoning typically doesn't, it limits the size of the unit. It has, I think, even like some prescription for bedroom, 3 bedroom units. What I found difficult is that, if you want design guidelines or standards, the state has to approve them. The state has to approve your plans. So as you're going through the process, and so I think it's pretty heavily regulated. There are these financial incentives, which to me are kind of small. I guess the bigger one is like looking at Mansfield, they had these 3 properties, and it looks like under their current zoning, maybe they could do 8 to 10 lots, but under 40Y, they can do 80. And it's like, wow, this is great. But what, Rob and I talked about is, our subdivision regulations still call for, like Mansfield, they must have, different subdivision regulations because really the creation of lots is it's not through 40Y, it's through subdivision. And what we require in terms of road right of way width and sidewalks and all this stuff to me would have to be changed if we were going to do a 40Y somewhere where we thought it would create these new streets because our subdivision regulations necessarily wouldn't allow for what could be traditional neighborhood style development with say like 18-foot wide roads or 20-foot wide roads. We'd still getting, we'd be getting, a 50-foot right of way with, 30 feet of pavement. And that's maybe not what you want when you have smaller homes. And so and maybe it is, but we'd have to kind of maybe tweak our subdivision regulations too. Um, as an overlay, I feel like, we could do something really similar to 40Y. We just wouldn't be able to get to that maximum size unit or those bedroom counts necessarily. So yeah, I haven't digested it enough to say like, for instance, do we have, would we consider another type of overlay? Like we could call a cluster, we could have a cottage style development overlay that is really specific to cottage style development, for instance. And it is really similar to 40Y, but we apply it in, these zoning districts. And maybe that, Jesse, gets to your point. It's not, we're not then saying like, yeah, these 10 properties have to be redeveloped to make this 40Y work. Now all of a sudden it's, anyone could take advantage of it, and it's not like kind of pressing that. I don't know. I haven't, yeah, I'm the Mansfield one is interesting. I was trying to think like, are there actually undeveloped properties in town where we would apply the 40Y? Because to me, that would be the easiest and make the most sense. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Fred, I see your hand. One more thought, but just to clarify two things you said, Nate. One is that you agree the incentives are pretty small. Like there's not a lot we get from this program.
Paltry.
Paltry, okay, we'll go with that. Other than the ability to max size, to put, like we can't do that otherwise in zoning.
We couldn't say like, we're going to create this overlay and the maximum size unit can only be 1,000 square feet, or we want, 1,500 square foot, one bedroom, or something. We typically, you can't do that in zoning. So the state can do it because they've set up this program 40Y. But it's really atypical that you would say like 10% of the units have to be three bedroom and the maximum size of a unit is 1,850 square feet.
And again, just from my understanding, we as a town can't do anything like that. We can't make our own incentives for some kind of building, like as a program. Only the
We,
state
we
can do that.
maybe not through zoning. I think it's worth exploring. It's interesting that the state's trying it. So,
Yeah.
typically I've been told we can't. So,
Got it. I mean, it makes me think about taxes and all kinds of stuff like that, but I know
right,
that's not zoning, but that's more of a
right. Yep.
tax incentive for doing small cottage style development, for example, or whatever we might decide.
Right.
Cool. All right. Fred, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was intrigued by this, and one of the main reasons is that all of these units would allow for the transfer of equity, and that's very powerful. And the other thing that occurred to me is that the way the state seems to be regulating this, if we got nowhere with the accessory dwelling units, that with the rules that we wanted to put in place that would prevent the LLCs and student houses. That's not what is anticipated here. And since the state seems to be so heavily regulating 40Y, maybe they would allow us in that regulatory context to do something that they did not allow us to do with ADUs generally. And I don't know where that comes out. I don't know enough about this, but I would like to at least think about that.
Yeah, so there is a section. I'm just looking at there's a PDF with all the rules for the state. There's one titled income restricted and income restriction. And they basically specify if it's a rental unit, it's affordable and occupied by individuals, households, something less than 110% of the area median. So it does allow you to, or it requires you to have affordable rental units. And then there's also requirements for home ownership, some percentage of the units also, which is great. I think on both fronts for our town particularly. Like it would make more affordable rentals, whether students or otherwise, and potentially more affordable ownership. So I guess that's stuff we would lose if we sort of did our own design, right, Nate? Because we can't put those requirements in on our own.
No, we could have like a, an overlay with their own with its own inclusionary requirements. So we could try to, it's hard to differentiate between rental and owner. So yeah, I think that's where, as state regulations and, state law, they have that ability to have some of these controls that
Yeah.
typical zoning doesn't. Um,
So I was just imagining, okay, so let's say we get to that point, and now I build four little houses on my single family lot, and one of them has to be affordable. That means probably three of them become student rentals, and one of them is young family who needs affordable housing. Is that a good mix throughout? I'm not sure, right? If that's desirable place for a family to live, but to be debated, I think more. Fred, I'm guessing your hand's still up, but not.
I forgot to take it down, but um, I remain curious as to whether the state supervision would allow for, you mentioned four with one. What about all four accumulating equity and uh, uh, being limited in terms of student access?
I think I don't remember. Angus, did you get that deep into what they allow? I think they all can be owned, and then there's requirements on the percentage that's affordable to purchase, right? So I don't think there's a restriction on, but I don't know if you can require that they're all owned. I need to dig in a little bit more to see that piece.
When you say owned, you mean owner occupied?
Sorry, yes, owner occupied.
Yeah, my recollection is that there was a percentage initially that needed to be owner occupied. Um, but I can't remember what it was.
I don't see that right now. Not clear.
yeah, I mean, I guess I was surprised, sorry, just to jump in that, it's really dense, the 40Y. And so yeah, I read through the regulations and then I was trying to go through again and right, just trying to think about where would we apply it and how and what would it look like. I think design standards would be important. Otherwise, I think what it is, some communities, um, they really have large lot zoning in a lot of the residential areas. So it's like, acre and a half or 2 acres or, we in our outlying residential, we have that. But I think a lot more communities, even around 495, have like 2 acre zoning or something. And 40Y is allowing them to say you can aggregate properties or a few parcels instead of now you have 6 acres, which is only 3 lots, but maybe you can do 20 units now. And in Amherst, we've had kind of, I will say, flexible zoning in many areas. And so it's trying to think of where would this work and, what do we think it would look like? So if we're interested in like narrow streets and smaller house lots, it's like, do we take, you know, like would we put it over like, Hampshire College land or land in North Amherst that's undeveloped and say, this is a great 100 or 200 acres. We'd love to see, you know, a nice neighborhood streets with, really dense housing. I don't, yeah, I was
But do
trying to
we,
just,
did you get that far actually looking at a map? Like I was I meant to try and do that too, because that seems like a great starting place for the home ownership, for the owner occupied piece.
yeah, because I was thinking like along arterial roads or like East Amherst, I think a 40Y, I think we could do it differently than a 40Y. We could just have like a 40R or even just an overlay. Like we did a new drive and say, you know, in the commercial zone in East Amherst, we want 4 stories and we want a mix of these design standards and we could do that without a 40Y. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know I didn't look at a map, but that's kind of that was my next idea of like, okay, how, where do we make it have the most, impact or
Yeah.
worthwhile? Yeah.
Because also to me, these should be certainly near public transportation, ideally walking distance from one of the town centers, right?
Right.
We're talking about higher density, more affordable places. I think you'd want them to have that access.
Mhm.
Angus, your hands up. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the way other communities have been approaching 40Y is they have specific tracts of land, as Nate was just saying, to to designate, as opposed to using it as an overlay in a bunch of different areas. Um, or yeah, so I as I was the deeper I got into 40Y, the more I was like, why not just 40R for a lot of what we're thinking, or just a straight overlay. And so to me, I think 40Y could be worth looking into if Nate, you and others on the subcommittee feel like there are good chunks of parcels, like the one Mansfield is proposing to overlay, like Northampton used for 40R, their big, redevelopment at the what is it, the state hospital. I think the 40Y could really be worth looking into, and maybe Hampshire, it might be a worthwhile thing for us to reach out to Hampshire or other big landowners to see if they have big parcels where that would be a helpful thing. But otherwise, I'm not sure that going down the 40Y route and like plopping little 40Y overlays across town is a good approach. It seems like choosing a thinking about, I guess the way that I'm thinking about it is actually merging some of this with the third thing on our agenda around, or maybe it's the second thing. I can't remember. Anyway, whatever the main arterial roads
Yeah.
is, because I feel like we could do a 40R or just some kind of an overlay for actually several of our village center areas on major arterial roads that would allow us to kind of open up options in a variety of different ways, whether it's encouraging more kinds of commercial property, more mixed use developments, larger apartment complexes, and then also, possibly um, denser housing that's not like apartments, but is like row houses and that kind of thing. So I think that might be a better route for us to take if there's no larger chunks of land that we can think of that would be good to pursue for 40Y.
Yeah, I largely agree. That the only other place that caught my thoughts for an area was the what's it designated? The professional research park area, right? That's not really built up at all, on the north of North Amherst, basically, as a pretty sizable spot. That again, I didn't do any math, but I think you could fit a good chunk of these in there. Nate, do you know offhand how many acres that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've looked at the PRP. There's some in North Amherst, and then off Belchertown Road. Um, Ironically, both sites have a lot of wetland,
Hmm.
but it could be worth pursuing. Yeah, I think, Angus, I like your approach. What I started looking at and talking with staff about is the cost of construction, and especially road construction utilities, is such that to create new roads, they definitely have to be double loaded, and there has to be more than, like just a traditional single family home subdivision now. It's almost like you have to have multi-unit or like a cottage style. Like you have to have a density that for instance, like Orchard Valley, I don't know if a developer would do that much anymore where you have one home per 3/4 of an acre. It's just too expensive to build that infrastructure. And so it's like, is it really like one home for every, right? Is it 6 homes an acre? So you have to have like really small lots or allow, right, townhouses or whatever different kind of housing type in a 40Y. Um, to make it worthwhile. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's some big parcels in areas in North Amherst, right? I think that PRP is interesting, and then there's some in South Amherst, but I don't. There's a few off Route 9 that maybe would work. I haven't. Right, the Mansfield approach seems like they must have worked with the property owners and said, "Here is a great opportunity," and so we could look at try to figure out what we think a minimum is. Is it like 50 acres? Um, and then
Hmm. Bruce, please join us.
Um, I'm I've just started this chart or a list of descriptors of sites or parcels that are well suited to 40Y development because I thought, well, if I or others were looking, it would be good to have basically a list of criteria, and I've got 5 down. The parcels there should be a certain size, um, and that might take a moment or two to flesh out. It sounds like they should be close to village center, and then we would have to define close, but maybe it's half mile because maybe it's walking distance, we might say, is what close means. Then I guess we would probably want municipal sewer and water availability, right? We would require that. We might certainly, I think, would say that being on a PVTA route would be an advantage. So that's number four. And number five might be something to do with who owns them. I mean, there's going to be certain types of ownership that are going to be better than others, or maybe even specific individuals or organizations. So, are there any other descriptors without necessarily defining them exactly, but broad descriptors that we can
Sounds
home
like
in on?
what Nate just brought up might be
Which I
important.
didn't hear because I was writing my
Sure.
1 to
Correct me
5.
if I'm wrong, Nate. It's the scale needed to support the cost of the infrastructure, basically. Like
Oh, that's the size. That's number one. That's how big the basic parcel assemblage is, whether it's one big parcel or three smaller adjacent contiguous parcels. But that would be a size thing, right? Or is there
Yeah, I
is there
think
more to it than that?
I think Nate was saying that it's more like the sewer and water, where it would be the cost, the parcels would have to be of a certain size in order to warrant the town extending roads
Well,
into that.
and the developer's cost. So, the
Right.
cost to actually build out a subdivision road now is expensive.
Okay.
And
So
so,
there's a relationship between one and three.
right,
Three can be less positive if one is more positive.
right. Yeah. I think
It's
those are,
complicated.
I think, yeah, those are good. I don't, hearing Bruce, having you summarize that makes me kind of go back to Angus and right to like plop 40 Ys down, like a little 40 Y, like on Route 9 here and a little 40 Y here doesn't seem to make the most sense where we could do that with other zoning tools or overlays or a 40R.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to me, 40Y would be kind of this different development method we're looking at. It's almost like where we would allow open space conservation developments or herds right now, because we've had some ideas in our bylaw. We've had them for a long time. It's like now it's like almost like wherever we allow those, we should allow 40Y, for instance, or something, and come up with those standards to make it feasible. And yeah, I haven't really mapped it um, or like taking those criteria, Bruce. I think, we could, I'm not sure there's many more. I think the size and infrastructure is kind of all related, right? So it's like, right, how do you
Yeah.
envision a loop road or something or connected streets and on a
Hmm.
property?
Yeah, when you say open space conservation development, I think you mean open space community development. There's not a
Right. Yeah.
good. I
Right.
was just making sure there wasn't another
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
entity that I wasn't aware of.
Um,
Okay, good,
Fred,
good.
you're up.
Yeah, I was, what came to mind was the large area that's on the east, I'm sorry, the west side of Sunderland Road, uh, heading out from, it's completely undeveloped. And at some point there's wetlands, but I think it would probably accommodate a subdivision like this.
Yes, that's the site that I had in mind when I was compiling, and that's why I added Ono because I believe that's Lucinda Jones, W.D. Cole's ownership. Is that correct? Anybody know other than that? And I think Cinder's got um, kind of imaginative housing development ideas in the back or the front of her head for those sites. So I think she's um, probably would be a willing conversationalist.
Yep, makes sense. Um, okay. Any last thoughts for 40Y? And we'll put this on the shelf. Yeah, Angus.
Well, I guess one question I have is, so is it worth, it sounds like the way we're trending is if there are a few large parcels where this could make sense, then it seems like it would the next step would be identifying where those parcels are, if they exist, and who owns them, and then possibly talking to those owners. Would those be kind of logical next steps?
Or, I almost think if we have those ideas, it's almost like then doing a conceptual like subdivision, or like, what do we think, like, how, what would 40Y get us? And so it's almost like, well, here's what we could do under our zoning, and what do we want 40Y to do? So is it, um, because we could set a small lot size or some other things, right, and really change the density. So I think that would be something. And then maybe, I guess, if we are like, wow, this actually seems to make sense in these two places, then it's maybe reaching out to the owners and really saying like, okay, is this something to pursue? Yeah, I'm curious, um, right, again, of like, then maybe we ground truth it even with a developer or two, right? If we have this site, we could ask, for instance, a private developer or two, staff could, or some, individually or privately, right? So it's not a public thing, but like, okay, what do you think about this? Like, is this actually a feasible solution for new development? But
Hmm.
yeah,
There's
I'd be
actually
curious. Yeah, sorry, Bruce.
there's actually a site on the north side of I think the cemetery on East Pleasant Street. It looks like a farm field, and I thought, oh, maybe I should look at that and see whether I could buy it. And then I noticed that it goes all the way, the parcel actually goes all the way back through the forest at the end to the railway. It seems to me to be it's long and thin as I recall, and kind of oddly shaped, but it's a big parcel as I recall, and so it's perhaps a little further than walking distance. It's not. It's probably walking distance from Cushman if there could be a trail along the railway track or so forth. But still, it occurs to me that that might be a place. I don't know who owns it, so it could be one of those parcels that's got family feud ownership, which immediately is like no thank you. But whatever. So I'd be interested to just at my end of town anyway, have a look and see what parcels exist, and I could even plan to talk to Cinder just personally if we want to move in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like I'll say the what UMass owns, it's now like part of their farm, but at the end of, you know, um, what at one point was going to be developed, right? There's streams through it, but it's like, it's the same thing as in North Amherst. And Bruce, what you mentioned to me is like, oh, there's already a lot of subdivisions around there. Could there be some neighborhood connections or things, whether it's
Hmm.
walking trails? And so, yeah, it's like that would
Are
be right.
you looking at the old Hope Church,
Yeah.
so-called Hope Church site?
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
So I think that's probably off the table, but I see that, like Harlow Drive and those subdivisions, kind of small lots. And it's like, oh, imagine if we were able to continue streets through and have even, these kind of residential connections, pedestrian connections. But
Hmm.
um, as you were talking about that one property, I was like, oh, yeah, I don't know how feasible it is either. But the idea of it's to me, although it may not be like, quote, walkable to like downtown, but it is within a residential area. So it's not too isolated.
No, it's quite walkable to the North Amherst
It is. Yeah.
community, so it's a half mile there, and the walk would be nice because you would have one option would be to walk across the farms
Right.
and that way, even through our place down through the Mill River Conservation Area and so forth. So it's nicely connected. It's also on the western end, of course, you've got Crestview and Hobart Lane and the student apartments, so it's fairly boisterous on occasion.
Right.
And I'm not sure that the Rolling Ridge people would want to have the connector road. That probably would be something to uh, manage the expectations around.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I just think that, like, oh, that's what would it'd be nice to me to have these kind of circular loops you could do in terms of walking. It also does mean vehicles too, but I see it as like, oh, as opposed to just having you know, a development that then is insular to itself, to be able to have some connections to the surrounding is nice. But
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
let's just table 40Y for the moment. Sounds like
Sorry, could I ask one other question,
yeah, of
Jesse? I'm
course.
sorry.
No, it's fine.
So how this is because I'm new to the planning board and I don't know how things work. How do y'all go about figuring out possible parcels that would work for something like this? Like Bruce, you're mentioning that you're gonna do some digging, but like how do you do that?
Oh, I just look at a satellite map,
Okay.
or a combination of a satellite map and the parcel map. You can
Okay.
toggle from one to the other. What I typically do when I'm doing this kind of thing is I take screenshots of the same area
Yeah.
with different with the two, and then I've got my two images that I'm not enthralled to the town website, and I just put them side by side and have a look at them.
Okay.
Yeah,
yeah,
Okay.
our online GIS and even like Google Maps, but our online GIS, you also have wetland layers and other things. So you can create a few series of maps and just
Right.
Yeah,
kind of do a rough test, like, okay, um, topography, wetlands, utilities, even just, you know, and then, I think like to like Bruce's point, you have a kind of a set of criteria. It sounds like we have a few. I don't know if we need to have any more, but then you just, you know, yeah, have fun with it. You just kind of, you just write.
yeah,
The ability to like scroll online and now like zoom in and out is pretty amazing. So,
yeah.
yeah,
You've got a greater facility with the GIS than I do. I think
and that
I got a
that's
little bit
also
frustrated. So I
just
just
just in the last couple of years, that's really improved a ton.
yeah,
And so when I first got involved, I was trying to make maps of where rentals were, and it was very difficult to work with our town stuff. But it's like night and day now. You can
oh,
really
that's good to know. No,
add
I use the satellite overlay because I
it.
can recognize it,
Right.
in my
It takes
mind,
it
and then I
takes
use
some
the
like
parcel map.
it's not all intuitive
Mm,
the system, but once you figure out some basics, it's pretty
yeah.
easy.
Well, those two maps get you going, and then as Nate mentions, you can fold in the other ingredients, a bit like making a cake. You don't put all the ingredients in the bowl at the same time. My two ingredients are the satellite map and the parcel map, and from that, I then decide whether I'm interested in the utility maps or the wetland maps or the topo maps or various other things.
Gotcha. Thank y'all.
Sure, Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing when I use the town maps for is the property card, which has the book and page. And um, if you access the Hampshire County Registry, you can immediately find something out about the property transfer history and so forth. Um, that's how I was able to do that historical analysis of my end of North Whitney Street. I did that all just from my computer. I've been doing this quite a bit, and so anyway, that layer is also readily available.
Yeah, sounds like we have a variety of strengths. Uh,
All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about our North Amherst overlay. And Nate, do you have like a few important details you'd like us to get some concrete decisions, at least from this group, on to help you progress the actual description?
yeah. I mean, it was nice a refresher last night at the planning board, and I guess I have to go back to see some notes. I guess Jesse, I think you had mentioned at one point, like if we move this forward, kind of what's kind of the political environment for it? Like is this, are we just going to have a great idea that then it won't get voted on, right? For instance, and so that's where I guess I've been um, thinking about like it's a pretty big area. I think it makes sense, but do we shrink it? Do we reduce um, the density And, we talked about like what are the residential uses and are we really, is it market rate? So is it open to anyone or do we specifically say is it for students or not? I guess, it's all those little things, but if you look at a map of the town, I still think it's a good idea. I do think there's a lot of questions. I think a lot of people might not be supportive of it. And so, something I'd still like to work on. I'd like to be working on some other things at the same time. I guess what I'm not sure. Like for instance, it's not like other departments in town are like, oh, this is great. Like let's keep working on this. And so, I think the planning board and this group, uh, like it, and I think some others might, but yeah, that's it. I'm kind of trying to figure out like what's a good approach to keep it moving forward. And it's a little different than University Drive. I feel like, interestingly enough, University Drive, given its location and some of the things, people seemed more initially supportive. And so that's kind of where I am. I want to be realistic of time and effort. So these properties, so I guess why this was looked at, years ago, is for two reasons. One is that they're non-conforming, and through a special permit in our zoning bylaw, we allow them to be increased. And so there's an ability there, but it just is not used because it's the special permit. And the one of the housing studies said, it's worthwhile to look at these areas because there's already density there. Sometimes it makes sense to increase density given, there's the infrastructure possibly and other things. Um, and so, it's almost like if we just change that special permit to site plan review with some conditions, it could allow these developments to change. We're then trying to really increase density or change things, but I don't know. It's like what's appropriate. That's all I think all the questions about, right, if we allow like 10,000 students to live here, that's an exaggeration, but like, is there some density which is unmanageable in terms of public safety or just everything? And we haven't even gotten there. I don't know. It seems like I was curious just to hear a little bit more, I guess, about some of the other comments from the discussion in North Amherst. Like, are there really like a few things we can take from that, or is it, I don't know. That's all.
Sure. Uh, I hear you saying you don't think it has much legs to go beyond our discussions. My reaction is if we could get something to a presentable state without too much effort, either it would be good to see council's reaction, to see what their big criticisms are, or hold it to a place where we're then ready with 3 or 4 other zoning proposals, as we've been talking about. But again, I don't know how much, if that's a couple hours of your time or like 20 hours of your time to get it even to that place where it's presentable. Yeah, but certainly we could talk more about how the meeting went. But Bruce, go ahead.
Well, it's because of the way the meeting went that I have my current opinion. By the way, I apologize for being late. The reason that I was late was the time got away from me because I was writing down all my thoughts about this, and suddenly it was 11:40. But what I've drained from that meeting are two things. One is that there is a body of resistance, which is not kind of organized as much as it is kind of residual in the North Amherst community. So that says to me, what we should now then do is to focus the proposal on exactly what we think is the right thing and not worry about any shenanigans around what might be more or less political acceptable. There's deep six, all of the kind of little pieces that you might add in to try and get a bit of support here and a bit of support there. And we go straight for the jugular. And the jugular is, this is for student housing because it's the right goddamn place for it and we need it. And there are good reasons why we need it. And I think that we should be clear and unequivocal and go straight in, as I said, for the jugular on this. And number two is because the resistance is here in North Amherst. We don't know whether the resistance is townwide or on council. And we shouldn't assume so. So I think we should make the best argument we can as to making this overlay a student overlay. recognizing that there's going to be substantial benefits in terms of residual affordable housing, and that we should have an interesting community-based way of dealing with that, recognizing that putting housing outside of the campus as opposed to on the campus gives us the tax revenues that we don't get, recognizing that we have a large need for student rental housing. We should expect that this can satisfy a significant portion of it, but not all of it. It should work in conjunction with an effort to persuade the university to do a public-private partnership on university land. We should identify perhaps where we think those can be, vis-a-vis Jesse's notion that if we're going through a very clear and unashamedly specific overlay for principally for student housing, we should couple it with what other things are going on. One of them would be this is a complementary effort with the university to get more student housing on campus where students want to be. This place is close to campus, so it's not perhaps where students would ideally choose to be, but it's the best we can offer in town, and so it's our an effort to address this problem. As a board, we have a responsibility to do it. We've listened to the North Amherst community and we've thought about it, and here's where we're going. And number three is, by the way, we're also we have these other schemes to satisfy workforce housing, affordable housing, senior housing, what have you, in parts of town which are more suited to it, which is not here in this North Amherst. It's going to get a lot of blowback. We're going to suffer a fair amount of people who are going to talk about traffic calamities and so forth. Well, we've heard that. We can just let that roll off, doing it, recognizing that we can assuage those anxieties by not letting cars accumulate on that site. Because it's student housing, we put the bulk of the parking somewhere else, and so forth. So I think it's a good solution. It's a good town-wide solution. It might not be ideal for North Amherst. I know North Amherst complain that the town's problems get solved at the expense of North Amherst more often than they do about everywhere else, particularly South Amherst. But ride that horse. So I think we shouldn't unsaddle this bronc. We should proceed with the investment we've made in time and effort. We should put it forward, and if it fails, God bless us. We at least have done what we need. And if it fails because not enough people have a sufficiently broad overview of the general solution concepts, then that's perhaps a sad thing, recognition of us not being able to make the case strongly enough. But that's what I think we should do. That's how I think we should proceed. And because I would be, as I said before, I'll write the case. I'll make the case for this.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Bruce. Angus, I have some thoughts, but Angus, go ahead.
I don't have much to add to what Bruce just said. I fully agree. I think, and I think it's essential that we try to get at least two other proposals ready by the time I think we could gauge interest on council for this particular thing in a few months. But in terms of actually proposing something to council, I think if we had two other proposals, either for the for something with 40Y or something with 40R, thinking about arterial roads, that kind of a thing, East Amherst along College Street, some other things. I think if we have a slate of proposals, I think council is less likely to. I mean, they might just say it's all too much. But I think Jesse, I'm really steeled by the comment you shared last night about, what was it, 13 years ago, and the exact same concerns, and it's a concern all over Massachusetts, right? I mean, this is why the state legislature is doing so much around housing, whether we, agree with it or not, things have reached a boiling point, and that's all exacerbated by UMass here in this community. But it's happening all over the state and frankly all over the country. Even in places like where I'm from in Texas that have traditionally been building a lot of houses, things are slowing down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we should go for it. But it's just essential that we have other components to our proposal.
So I largely agree. I said this before, and I'm even more feeling even stronger about it now, that maybe an approach is to say, take North Amherst, get it to a workable place, and at the same time, try and include the gateway slash my idea about north of Fearing as the surrounding entities to the campus, and say these need to be prime student housing areas for all the reasons Bruce just laid out. If we have those two pieces ready, I also think there's a different opportunity for someone, whether it's the town manager or planning board, to approach UMass and say, look, we're going to do this. Can't you meet us and do some more building adjacent to these? Can't you help in this process? I have no idea how that would go, but it's taking a more comprehensive look that maybe we get some buy-in from the people who pull the levers here on campus. I think the two areas would be very different, meaning I think I like where we're headed with the North Amherst idea. I'm sure I said this already in this group. My favorite idea for the between Fearing and campus is the row house or small apartment type allowance, which again, I think would triple or quadruple density in this small, but could be very impactful area. So I can imagine us working up those two ideas as one package to present, or waiting for more to come along. But just thinking timeline wise, the more we want to wait for, the months get added to seeing how things move, for various reasons. I did have a question in there too for you, Nate. Is there a mechanism by which planning board, assuming planning board knows votes to do this, present something to council really as a way to ask them, should we develop this? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I think
trying to have a finished overlay or finished rezoning, is it possible to present an idea like this and say, can you vote and tell us, should we continue working on this?
yeah, I was going to talk to Dave about that. I think maybe it was you earlier, Jesse, you mentioned like talking to the CRC, and I made a note to myself. I think that's something that, in January we should try to do for this. I think it is. Maybe we try to I can work on the draft and here's like what we're really looking at. And it's almost like, we talk with the CRC, if not the council, but the CRC at least, and say, okay, well, what are the concerns, and I think we have a really good rationale for it. Um, and kind of just get their sense for it. I think with the new council, I think it might take until February to get the subcommittees reconstituted, but I think it's worthwhile to get to them right before it's a final, a zoning amendment, and work through what the concerns are. And I think that's helpful. I think what happens is, we spend a lot of time, well, say it's like the Housing Zoning Subcommittee or Planning Board or staff, right? If someone is developing something, but if it doesn't reach other audiences, the first time they see it is, when it's already in a kind of a final form and without a lot of the background knowledge or information. And so, yeah, I kind of like that idea of maybe working on it, getting some text down, and then having a few extra meetings with different folks to see. I agree. I don't want to be pessimistic about it. And I have a map I look at right above my monitor, and I'm always like, man, I think it's a really good, it's a really smart place, and it's just, you know, um, yeah, I guess I haven't heard. I've heard a few people say, I think that's an interesting idea, but I guess more of it's, residents. I get emails saying like kind of what Bruce was echoing, like, people complaining, and I think there's ways to try to manage that. I just,
Yeah.
it's hard to say like, oh yeah, well, we're going to have an extra bike path, and we're going to limit cars, and we're really going to try to address the traffic. And, I don't know if people will believe it or not, but those are the kind of things I'd want to build into the overlay. And
Yeah.
I actually think the bones are there. Like we have like these offsets from the roads where it's only 3 stories and behind that it's five. And, I feel like we can have some design standards. I mean, I almost feel like I don't know. I feel like we could put it together and I guess the issue there is that, any developer could come out and get a different idea, right? So it's
Sure.
not so
Sure.
prescriptive that we know exactly what it's going to look like or what it's going to be.
That's
That,
what most things, right? That
right.
we would do.
Yeah.
Do we have resources to have some quick renderings done of what we might imagine? Um,
Maybe.
okay.
It's probably easier to find photographs of places like that we think that would be
Right.
well.
Right. Yep.
I
Yeah.
just feel like that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well,
Also,
Agreed.
I'll look for those. I'll add that to my.
and then I'd love to hear your all thoughts about maybe packaging it. This idea of like, what's the circumference of campus, and putting that together as a package, right? Which again could be north of Fearing over to North Pleasant, but could also include the edges of East Pleasant that are on the east border of campus. And maybe that area is a different type of overlay zoning, whatever you want to call it. Right? I mean,
Right.
not to be, I know it's all very soon, but there's now presumably something's going to get rebuilt at Olympia Place, right? And so that's a pretty significant number right there of beds that will come up at some point. And if
Well, even that whole area is zoned, sorry, fraternity zone. It's one of the few areas in town where you could get these kind of social dormitories we allow off campus. And the rest of the properties in that area, a lot of them are owned by the university, the system itself. But again, it's a conversation to have, there could be another development or a few developments up there.
right,
And so it's like the RF is itself an overlay. It's a base zone, but it's acting as an overlay, allowing for something nowhere else in town. And so, I still think that's an interesting idea too. Just if we're looking at like, okay, here's like a few areas around campus, like what are, you know,
yeah, I mean that's the strong. I mean, Bruce laid it out very clearly what he was just saying, that these are the places we think students should live. Students think they should live. So why not help make it happen, right? Um,
right.
and
Yeah.
also what I like about presenting them together is it gets away from some of the NIMBY rejection ideas, right? I mean, it's then North Amherst can't claim it's just we're just trying to have North Amherst solve the problem. If it's touching multiple neighborhoods, it's harder to say no, it shouldn't be here, it should be somewhere else. Bruce, got your hand up.
Only that we do have a document which is I think it's called the rationale, and it was reading that rationale again before this meeting earlier this morning that got me going on the avoiding or moving away from trying to be all things to all people and hedging bets and all of those kind of phrases. So what I propose to do is and I'll take this on if you like, Nate, is I'll redraft that rationale to be perhaps, or not perhaps, I'll redraft that rationale as a version of what I characterize as going for the jugular. And so I'll do that shortly, and that can be a task that I take on as a proposal for us perhaps to review at our next meeting as basically a focus piece on this overlay initiative.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Angus.
Yeah, I was just Bruce, we may want to avoid using the term going for the jugular. But
Well, I've noticed. Oh, Sarah's back. When I first used that, before I did, I looked at the attendee list, and there was no one there. So I wanted to be clear
yeah, I agree with you.
amongst my colleagues.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree. I don't think this is a good phrase to use because, frankly, no one else would understand because it only makes sense in this context where
Right.
we've
Yeah.
spent 6 months talking about this, and we've gone here and we've gone there, and the phrase of that uh, bald crudeness
Yeah.
lands more effectively, I think, once in a group that's spent so much time talking about things and has so many contrary positions in its head. I thought I wanted to clear all of that out with one
Yeah.
um,
No, that's good.
a descriptive phrase that was unambiguous.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna add, I was tasked with looking up language around crowd control. And Nate, I could send you what I some different options that I found. I found a bunch of towns that have it mostly relating to special events, obviously, but I found one that had it as part of special conditions and design standards for a recreation district, which was, I think, similar enough to kind of how we're imagining an overlay to work. And it was combined with language around licensing authority that is like considering off-street parking, wastewater disposal, refuse disposal. So I think we could easily slot that in. It's just one line. But I can send that to you, Nate, if you wanted to add it to the overlay, because I know we talked about crowd control issues.
No, that's
Send it to me as well.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can share information like that, as long as we don't respond and have a conversation through email, it's always fine to share. Yeah, no, I mean there's also like safety through environmental design, which I know the police has,
Hmm.
they've been out to, Hobart Lane and others, for instance, over the past so many years and said, manage this vegetation so it's not acting as a screen and, plant things here to avoid large spaces. And so, it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, those are kind of some additional information we'd want in this overlay, right? So we're not, and I think we can say it in our purpose and we can lay it out and kind of the expectations. Then we want to follow through with it with some conditions or criteria. So, I feel like we already have a lot, kind of some bones there about, the, different circulation and massing and design. And so it's getting to some of these other pieces. Yeah, and I feel like I'd love to just,
What do
I'll make a commitment to sit down with it some more and really get some a new version out too.
what do you all think about trying to package this together with other campus adjacent ideas? Good strategy, bad strategy, and Nate, if you could find out if there's another way we could get in front of council for them to charge us to do something further, would be really useful, I think.
Yeah, and I think even if, like I said, I think even just I'll make a request that we try to get in front of the CRC in January or February, early February, and just,
Okay. Angus, you're still hands up, or is that legacy?
No, it's well, I was just going to respond to what you said, or you were asking about Jesse. I know you mentioned the Fearing Street thing a few times. I like the idea, but it's also a very different kind of construction
Yes, for sure.
or design layout that you're imagining there. And I wonder, or I worry, I don't know if that would be a different over. I don't know exactly how we would configure it. I think it's part of the RG right now.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be it wouldn't be in the same, whatever we're going to call it, overlay or
Sure.
otherwise. It would definitely be different because I think we have different requirements, or we imagine different things there. But I'm really thinking of the vantage point of solving the problem and
Yeah.
and showing that we're pursuing multiple things, right?
I guess one question that I would have for you, or I guess I have two questions. One, I worry that it would take a lot of work to figure out what that rezoning thing would look like there. I agree with you, it's a great location, but the other aspect of that is I think people are living in some of those houses, right?
There's last time I tried to figure it out, I came up with, I think it was 7 owner occupied houses
Yeah.
amongst 50 or so.
And they could, of course, remain. No one would be
Right.
forcing them out. But the benefit of the North Amherst overlay is that no one, people do live there. It could lead to changes long term.
Sure.
But the resistance to me would be very different because no one actually owns those houses in that area.
Yeah, understood.
Not entirely true, but I get the point.
Okay, just looking at the time, maybe we're good for this topic today, and we could spend 15 minutes. We're not going to get to everything, I think. We still had main corridor discussion, and I mean, it pretty much overlaps with some of the issues brought up by the citizen petitions. I think we had put on the agenda more about student housing and regulation avenues. I'd say let's put that one off. I do feel like we've discussed that, not recently, but in the past at some length, the different strategies. I'd love to get back to it, but as Bruce mentioned, I think Kitty and Darcy are going to also try and look into other towns that may have successfully been doing these things. So maybe we can hold off on that for today.
I think so, especially since neither of them is here.
Yeah. And then let's talk about the main corridors. Before I do, Sarah, do you want to jump on and share what you just emailed me? If not, I will summarize for the group. Great. Hi, Sarah. Should we unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. How's it going? My name is Sarah Barr. I have met some of you over time, and I am becoming a planning board regular. So Amherst College, as you may or may not know, is really interested in housing, particularly workforce housing. And it's a priority for Amherst and the other schools within 5 colleges as well. So I have been tasked with tackling the housing challenges. And so this spring, we're going to be working with a real estate development consulting firm to understand our workforce needs. Because, I've talked to all of the affordable housing organizations, and I've talked with the town at length, and everybody agrees that we need housing in all categories. But at Amherst College, we do college really good, but we're still trying to figure out how to do housing. So part of what I'm trying to understand are the tools and the resources that might be available if we try to build housing or increase density on the parcels that we have. And so I'm just trying to be an informed community member so that as these conversations unfold, I have a sense of what the planning board is talking about and interested in, and just know that you've got a ready partner here as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure. Could I just jump in quickly, Jesse?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, sometimes staff will meet with property owners and, you've met with the town. And sometimes it's really interesting to hear like what an owner is looking for in terms of, say, style, density. Typically what I would say, looking at probably some of the properties, the zoning doesn't allow maybe the creativity that you'd want. And then it's like, okay, well, what gets you there? So is it, a different overlay or tool, state tool, like a development method or something. And so it's always kind of helpful to understand that, kind of that piece. And so, I don't know if there's any, for instance, if there's some ideas there, because I do think, we talked, you heard the conversation today. There's, a few different ways to approach it, but, I think our zoning, our outlying residential zoning districts are really, single family zoning districts. They're not good at kind of a mix of different housing types.
Hey, Angus, go ahead.
I was just going to disclose that Amherst College is my employer, and I don't think there's anything else to say about that. But I think anything that we can do to increase housing at different levels is a great idea. And so if Amherst College chooses to pursue that, I think I will be probably abstaining from any votes that have to do with that. But I think it's a really essential thing. And then the only other thing I was going to say is the task that Kitty and Darcy are looking into. Is that I'm sorry to go back to that, Jesse, but I just wanted to quickly clarify. Are we thinking that they'd be researching how other towns are trying to classify student rentals? Is that
multiple things? So Bruce, please add if I'm incorrect. A couple of years ago, Bruce did a huge amount of work on identifying towns across the country that have facing similar problems and how they were addressing it, and didn't quite get all the way through his list.
Okay.
And so Kitty and Darcy were happy to jump back into that and try and just fill out the details, both of how student housing is or has been regulated successfully in other places, just what kind of zoning strategies, like basically all the above. how are
Okay,
other
okay,
towns with similar issues trying to solve?
okay. Thanks for clarifying, because I just want to make sure I wasn't going too deep down the definition of
No,
student
no,
housing route that we talked about was okay. Makes sense.
also,
That's it.
FYI, that definition came from us based on
Right. Yeah.
State College. Anyway, Bruce, go for it.
Oh, okay. I was just going to look for the list of questions. I had a list of questions that I compiled progressively, and I shared those with Darcy and Kitty as well. And there's a 10 or a dozen questions there that I would ask the relevant agent in the town. So it was typically the planning director, but not always, and not only. And I thought that they would take those questions, but the benefit of having them come back into this is that it refreshes our minds. I'll look at it again after having not done much for 2 years. Some of those questions may be sharpened a little bit now because we know a little bit better or differently. Kitty and Darcy will probably have their own take on those questions. So, but basically, there is a set of questions that have so far oriented the lines of inquiry or the line of inquiry with these so-called towns like Amherst. And so the intent is to continue what I started and hopefully re-energize me to uh, take a bit more too. But as I said repeatedly, the North Amherst Community Farm and everything associated with that is a huge soak of my time, which didn't exist 3 years ago, but started to be a problem for me 2 years ago. That said, the thing that I raised my hand for, though, was to um, we recognize your employer, Angus, as Amherst College and so forth, and I think that you rightly recuse yourself from conversations relating to decision making and so forth. But I don't think, and I hope you won't recuse yourself from conversations around building and constructing ideas or developing ideas and solution concepts and the kind of engagement that Sarah's just brought to the table. I would I would miss your disengagement from the discussion. I can understand your disengagement from the decision, but I hope it won't include disengagement from the bulk of the seminal work.
I agree, and I mean UMass is my employer. Just put it out there. So similar issues, but I don't think we're ever actually deciding on anything.
Yeah,
it's a last decision, and this came up as well. But
and if as we were saying, we were looking for sites for 40Ys or other sites of overlays, and so the college clearly has land, and so maybe that's that question that challenge that task extends to Sarah and the college as part of the work that they're doing now.
Sure. Sarah, is your hand still up?
It's still, because I wanted to kind of build on what Nate was saying and kind of bridge to what Bruce is saying. So
Sure.
So I'm part of a national network of colleges and universities that are looking at academic workforce housing. So specifically, because the kinds of pressures that we're facing in Amherst are not unique, as I think Angus pointed out earlier in the call. And so I've connected with a colleague at Pomona. And apparently Claremont has very similar challenges. And so one of the things the city of Claremont did is they worked with the college to do special high density zoning on an old golf course that wasn't being utilized. Because what Pomona was really concerned about was like their hourly staff, because it would take like an hour for dining services workers and custodians and all of that to come in. So I'm trying to find as many creative solutions across the country. So not sort of what Darcy and Kitty are looking at in terms of student housing, but really thinking about workforce housing and what are the tools that anchor institutions can use, and also the town, because I know that a number of municipal employees might like to live in town but are unable to. So really kind of digging into this question of, what are communities doing in the area of workforce housing. So hopefully the stuff that we're doing at Amherst College will be of interest to the planning board and to the housing subcommittee. And I will certainly keep coming to your meetings and asking questions and being in ongoing conversation with the town. But I really think it's going to take all of us working together to find a path forward. But, I don't, the housing situation is not getting better, but I do believe that, by working together, we can take some significant steps, which is
Hey,
exciting.
thanks, Sarah. And then once you've solved the problem for Amherst College, you can share that with UMass and say, here you go.
Well, this is actually one of the things that surprised me because I did not realize that UMass does not provide any support for its workforce when it comes to housing.
Oh.
And so, at Amherst College, we have a rental program. And so 85 rental units, 26 houses that are in the home ownership program. Um, and there is some urgency because apparently 61 people are going to go up for tenure in the next 5 years and get kicked out of rental housing with nowhere to go.
Yep. Yep.
So,
I know some of those people.
yeah, and when I was talking to colleagues at UMass, I was like, "You have nothing there?" And they were like, "Nope, there is nothing." So again, I think these anchor institution conversations and conversations about workforce housing are going to actually benefit everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Wow, interesting.
that. Angus?
Can I just ask a question of Sarah? And has there been any conversation between Amherst College and UMass about combining forces in any capacity around workforce housing?
So can you hear me? Oh, okay, I'm back. Okay, so the short answer is that it's come up across 5 colleges. So it's been talked. So 5 colleges is led by the chancellor and the 4 college presidents. So Smith, Mount Holyoke, Hampshire, and UMass. And uh, all of the leaders are interested, but it takes time and energy to kind of get on the ground and start solving these issues. So it's because I've been tasked with this, I can dedicate a lot of energy to it. And I think that Smith is also kind of more prepared because they have similar resources and land and stuff like that. But UMass is in a totally different league. So, I'm talking with colleagues across 5 colleges about this, but, I think that we're more ready to get moving. And my hope really is that like we can get started and then other folks will kind of, join the party as we move along.
Yeah, I would also add, I think, I mean, Sarah, I'm sure you know more than I do. Not only is UMass a different scale, but we have very different limitations or more limitations on what's possible in terms of resources and purchasing and renting. All aspects of this, UMass is very, very different limitations, I think.
Right. And that's why being a part of this National Workforce Housing Coalition has been interesting because it is pulling from, mostly private institutions, but also larger institutions, and they take very different approaches. So Princeton, for example, has a mortgage forgiveness program. So if you buy a house within 9 miles of Princeton, can get like a mortgage subsidy that is forgiven over time. So the longer you stay at the employer, um, and there are other things like block leasing and stuff like that. So the goal really with this first stage is to come up with a set of recommendations that could include just things that are being done in other parts of the country that we might not have thought about, which again, I think is going to be helpful overall for the community.
Yes, totally agree. That's great. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah, one thing you might not be aware of, and I discovered when I did the research I did about the historical aspects of where I live, is that 100 years ago, uh, let's see, yeah, actually more than that, 120 odd years ago, uh, Amherst College actually very actively was writing mortgages on, among other places, the house that I now live in. Uh, that was first mortgaged by Amherst College while it was constructed, and then the mortgage was paid off and so forth. I was astonished by the number of parcels that were mortgaged by the trustees of Amherst College.
That is fascinating, Fred. I did not realize that. I have I've been very curious about the college's relationship to the land in terms of, how the campus has grown over time, but also just again the interesting ways in which it has supported housing production. But I did not realize that it had been providing mortgages like that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, this is some distance from Amherst College. It's not contiguous at all with Amherst College. It's on the north side of Main Street, on down near the railroad tracks. So
Interesting.
All right. Just looking at the time, I think, Nate, you go ahead, but then I think I'm gonna adjourn us. I need 2 minutes for my next meeting.
Okay, sure. I was just going to say, Middlebury College, has done some things, with private developers. There's a few projects up there. Sarah, I don't know if you've,
Oh,
you
Mike Thomas, the CFAO, is the per at Amherst is the one that brokered those deals.
yeah, okay,
But again, that's why one of the things that's so exciting is like there are a number of people that have experience doing this that
right.
work at Amherst College now. So, it's a lot of good and exciting things that are coming together. And I
Yeah,
remain wildly hopeful.
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's great. As you're speaking, I was thinking like, oh, like you're right. So how can zoning get some of these things? So workforce housing, it's like, we could try to do income, but it doesn't guarantee necessarily who actually gets there. So if it's set to like 120 or 150 AMI, that's one way. Maybe there's others. And so I was just trying to get thinking of like, right, what are some other tools or methods to approach it? That's kind of where 40Y is interesting because it does things like bedroom size and square foot sizes, which is then going to try to limit price. It's different than what typical zoning does. So, anyways, yeah.
Okay. I'm out of time. You guys are welcome to stay. Guessing maybe you won't. We'll put things off to the next meeting. Sarah was our only public attendee, so I'm assuming there's no more public comment unless Sarah, you want to add something else. And I don't
Just
have any
thank you all. I
Oh,
really appreciate all that you're trying to do and have enjoyed attending the meetings and watching you all work. So thank you. And always good luck.
great. Thanks, Sarah, for extending the conversation as well. And any unanticipated items for anybody?
No.
Okay. See you all next time. Thanks.